2 games remain for the Sooners to show the fan base signs of life. You're listening to the Mainline Podcast. I'm Adam Jacquez, along with my co-hosts Tyler Burton and Corbin Polson. Guys, welcome to the depths of despair.
Cheers, fellas. Got a drink in hand.
Do we have to do this?
It's not going to be a drunk pod, but it may be better if it was. The
Dear
team may
God.
be better if they were drunk. Just a thought.
We took last week off. Obviously, all three of us got a lot going on in life right now. So coming into last week against West Virginia, Oklahoma found a way to win 2 games in a row. And then you go to West Virginia. And I don't even know where do you guys even want to start with this? I mean, do we have to talk about this game? I kind of feel like we have to give kind of some quick thoughts on what that performance was in Morgantown, if that's what you do want to call it. But Adam, just throwing it over to you, man. My God, 5-5, got to win at least one out of the next 2. I think Saturday is a must-win just to get to a bowl game. How far have we fallen?
Yeah, I don't see us going to a bowl game at this point. This is probably the worst. I think this is the lowest point of the season. Obviously, it's the worst loss in my opinion. You know, the other losses you could look at and kind of explain away as far as, you know, hey, you didn't have Dylan Gabriel for 2 games there. You knew going into Texas, you know, they were going to win by at least 17 points probably, and ended up being way worse. But the other games you kind of look at and go, okay, you know, a few things go your way here or there against solid teams in Baylor and K-State. And then you go to West Virginia, you know, probably the bottom feeder team in the entire Big 12. You rush for over 200 yards with your leading rusher, and you just can't get out of your own way. You just keep handing them opportunities. You can't play complimentary football whatsoever. And it's just embarrassing. It felt like you were looking forward to this team improving as the season had gone on and giving some signs of hope and some life and maybe some excitement for the next year. And they really haven't. It's seemingly like they've regressed at this point. So it's easily the most disappointing loss of the year for me.
Countless opportunities for Oklahoma to win that game on Saturday, Adam. West Virginia kind of seemed like was just begging for the better part of 3 quarters for Oklahoma. Okay, take this game, put us out of our misery. We want to fire our head coach. That's kind of the plan right now. They did fire their athletic director, so it kind of feels like it's only a matter of time for Neil Brown. But, you know, OU made costly mistakes on all 3 sides of the football, stupid penalties, missed tackles, drop passes, overthrows, and guys, what I thought was the first, you know, major bad coaching decision of the season for Brent Venables when he decided to kick that field goal on 4th and 2 with 6 minutes to go. Terrible. I thought that was a terrible call by Brent Venables, giving them the football at midfield by the Zach Schmidt miss. But guys, 5 times Brent Venables talked about it after the game. 5 times Oklahoma was in West Virginia territory, came away with 0 points. You pair that with going 1 for 11 on 3rd downs. You're not going to beat anybody. That West Virginia squad, guys, I texted you in the group chat. That was one of the worst football teams I've seen in the Big 12 in quite some time, even comparable to Kansas's standards over the last 4 to 5 years. And we just couldn't get out of our own way. That was an embarrassing loss. And there's really no other way to spin it. That's a bad look for Oklahoma. Now we find ourselves 5-5 and probably not going to go to a bowl game.
Outside of Eric Gray, do either of you have any bright spots about this game?
I thought Stutzman played pretty well.
The defense was decent in the first half.
I thought the defense was okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Outside of the 4th quarter, I thought they were okay, except they just can't get off the damn field.
Yeah.
That is the only issue with this defense because – guys, think back even just 3 years ago. If we would have held any team in the Big 12 to 23 points, we would be over the moon about that defensive performance. And of course, the one time we get an okay defensive performance, like the offense scores 20. So it goes back to, and we even going back to last year, complimentary football is just non-existent with this program. Mm-hmm. You go up 10 right before half. Give up a big kick return, ends up being a touchdown. I get we ran the 2-point conversion back. And then I'm even trying to think into earlier games, even against Texas. Had no chance of winning that game, but a couple drives, you're going downfield. You get away from the Wildcats and have an Eric Gray pop pass that gets picked off. You drop an interception, Texas goes and scores. There's just nothing in this program that is cohesive. Maybe that's a good word for it. It just feels all over the place. And as soon as somebody starts doing good, the rest of the ship drops off.
Yep.
It definitely seems like it's a mentally weak team the first time that they even face the slightest bit of adversity. But, I mean, you guys make a good point. Oklahoma just simply cannot get out of their own way. There's stretches where it looks good, but it's never complimentary football where this team is able to put all three phases of the game together. But guys, just going through and looking at some of the mistakes that this team made. I mean, like you said, Corbin, Oklahoma gave up 23 points. If going into that game, we would have taken that. I feel like all three of us would have confidently said that. But you've got Marvin Mims dropping a wide open touchdown pass. You've got Dylan Gabriel overthrowing a wide open Marvin Mims on a seam route. That would have been another touchdown as well. Braden Willis, the senior captain. This is the one negative thing that I'm going to say about it. He's due a mistake this year with how well he's played, but that's a huge mental mistake that took 4 points off of the board for Oklahoma. The offsides by the freshman. R. Mason Thomas, the face mask, they took it from a 3rd and 22 to a first down. West Virginia went on to score. Trayvon West, the one time where you have a chance to make a play and have an impact on special teams, you prematurely run into the punt returner, making a crucial error at the wrong times. And guys, that kind of sums up I think the overall theme of this football team this year is Oklahoma, when in crunch time, they are the team that is making the critical mistakes, and they can't get out of their own way. And that's why we're sitting here with 5 losses.
Yeah, the stats don't lie. In crunch time, any fourth down, whether it's us trying to convert them, we're not good at that. Ranked 100th in the entire country in converting our own fourth downs. On the flip side, the defense ranked 97th in giving up all those fourth downs. So they just can't get off the field. And the most painful way that they illustrate that is in the last 2 games, OU's needed to get the ball back to have an opportunity to score, to tie it or win the game. And they just haven't been able to get the ball back. The other team has completely taken the air out of the football and run out the clock or kick that last second field goal like West Virginia did. And yeah, it's just a sign that this team is mentally weak across the board. And it's sad to watch.
That's been the most depressing thing for me as an OU fan the last couple of weeks, is when Baylor got the football for the final possession last week, and then when West Virginia took over with 6 minutes to go, we knew that the defense wasn't stopping him. We knew that Baylor and West Virginia were going to go down there and score and hand Oklahoma a loss. So we talked about it. What is the panic meter level with Brent Venables right now? I don't think I'm curious to get your guys' thoughts on that here in just a second. I'm nowhere near as close to where I think a lot of Oklahoma fans are. I think our fan base right now it's embarrassing with some of the takes that are out there right now about this coaching staff and the direction that they believe this program is headed. So, guys,
well, let's talk about that though. Where do you point the finger? Is it coaching? Is it playing? Is it players? Excuse me. Is it scheme? You may have you may need more fingers than you have to point all the issues, but where are you pointing the big one?
I think it's a combination of everything, and I do want to start out by saying that there is absolutely no excuse for Oklahoma to be a 5-5 football team with the current makeup of this roster. I know that the Big 12 from top to bottom is this is the best that this team has been, the best that this conference has been collectively, maybe in the last decade. But I will say this, coming into this season, and I'm as guilty as anybody on this, I think we seriously overestimated the talent level on this football team. The talent lost in the offseason to the NFL, the talent that was lost in the transfer portal was severely underestimated. And guys, we hung our hats on the idea that it doesn't matter who's left on this roster. It's Brent Venables. So of course, Oklahoma is going to play good defense. So I think that I think that coaching does have a little bit to do with it, because Oklahoma continues to play undisciplined brand of football, particularly on defense, with penalties on both sides of the football. But I'm gonna come back to it. To me, I think it's talent. I really don't think that Oklahoma's got the guys right now to be able to compete with the likes of what TCU's doing, K-State, and I think You're shaking your head. Take it away.
How can you say that when we are have the 4th highest percentage in the blue chip ratio to begin the season? TCU's not on there. K-State's not on there. The only one I can see that's on there in this entire conference is Texas. At least Texas is somewhat respectable right now.
Yeah.
How can you say the talent's not there when I get not all recruits pan out to their projected status within a program as a player, heading to the pros, all of that stuff. But how can you say that when this team has recruited well? And we are so far short of what that is, but the talent on paper should be there.
Well, I think, you lost a third of your roster this offseason with
But
everything.
this is taking that into
I understand that,
Yeah.
but and then you brought in a recruiting class that again was highly ranked. Shout out to Coach Venables and the staff for being able to basically kind of save face and hold this thing together. Transfer portal wasn't as good to Oklahoma as it was to some other teams like in LSU. Large part of that I think was in fact that Oklahoma was basically the last Power 5 program that was able to bring in a coach. So the transfer portal was pretty bare with the options that were available for Venables and this team to choose from. Adam, you can speak on that better than anybody with the research that you've done. But I think that with the amount of turnover that this roster had and with some of the, especially the key positions having so many new faces and a lot of those new faces being, freshmen, underclassmen, guys that are in their first year of starting. So you pair that with having to learn a brand new scheme, both offensively and defensively. I don't think it wasn't a very good match. And that's kind of why I feel like Oklahoma is in the position that they're in right now because they're having to learn this new scheme with Brent Venables because they're not, to me, it's not that they're not talented, but what Venables needs to do to be successful as a defense, Oklahoma simply does not have the guys, particularly in the front seven, to be able to do that.
I agree in the sense that, yes, there's not enough talent on this team for where it should be, where it needs to be. But there's enough to be a lot better than 5-5, or at least to be performing better to show signs of life. You've got Reggie Grimes as a former 4-star. You've got Woody Washington and Jane Davis, who are former 4-stars. You've got Ethan Downs, who looked like a solid player, with a high ceiling coming into the season. There were lots of guys that were showing signs of hope, and like Corbin mentioned, that blue chip ratio was at 71%, fourth. Even when you take into account the transfers coming in, that only lowered it to 65%. So there's more than enough guys on this team. Now, at the same time, none of those guys look better than they did at the beginning of the year. They should at least, if you think the talent is terrible on this team, they should at least go from terrible to bad. At least that would be good coaching. Just because, these guys aren't Alabama defenders, they should still be improving, and they're not. They're getting worse.
I think that the record is not completely indicative of the quality of this football team because we're a handful of plays away from total of beating Kansas State, of beating Baylor, of beating West Virginia. So we're just simply not doing the little things that is required to play winning football and close out games. Add one to the win column as opposed to the loss column. Corbin, what about you? Is it talent, coaching, mixture?
So it's some sort of mixture that I can't quite figure out. I'm looking at last year's record versus this year's record. Last year's record, guys, 6-1 in one-score games in 2021. This year, the team is 0-3. That is sports in general, right? The ball is going to bounce different. If you put together a drive against K-State, if you put together a drive and a stop against Baylor, if you get a stop against West Virginia, this outlook's totally different from 8-3 to 5-5. Massive difference. You could say the same thing about last year. If West Virginia is able to not fumble the ball over their head on their drive in Norman, they probably end up winning that game. So I don't know what it is, guys. I even Oklahoma's B talent should be more competitive than a 5-5 football team. And so if you're telling me this is the best we have, I just have a hard time coming to that conclusion. I understand we're not necessarily always in like a top 5 recruiting class, but we recruit better than almost anybody outside of that team in orange to the south of us. You can't tell me that there's not talent. Now, if the talent's not developed, if the talent's not reaching its potential, fine, I can get behind that. But just talent alone, I can't get behind that this team is lacking talent. It just doesn't make sense because this team was 8-0, 9-0 last year. Majority of the guys are still here. And so I'm having a tough time kind of gathering out, especially on the offensive side of the ball. I can make the defensive argument fine, but offensive side of the ball, they're all still here.
Yeah. Let me put some numbers behind that just because people say that, there was so much roster turnover. You had about 41% of the roster that is new players this year. That's pretty high on the grand scheme of things. There's some other teams that are in similar neighborhoods like Ole Miss, like Oregon. Two teams doing pretty well there. Yep. That's not always the rule. There's other teams that turned over a lot of their roster like Nebraska that are not doing well. But you can also look at that and go, okay, 41% of the roster are guys that Venables said, I'm going to go pursue you in the transfer portal or as a recruit or as an existing recruit that he said, I want to keep your, your commitment to the University of Oklahoma. And how many of those guys are actually contributing from the freshman class? I guess you could say R. Mason Thomas is contributing. Grayson Halton is contributing.
Oh, those are stretches.
Jaron Canick a little bit. Yeah. I mean, they're really not contributing whatsoever from the transfer portal. Obviously Dylan Gabriel, because, there was no quarterback on the roster. So someone had to do that. Outside of that, who's contributing? McCade Matire. I mean, he hasn't been good.
He's been a disappointment. Yeah. That's what I worry about that heading forward, guys. Like, if you're not already working on transfer portal stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
You're going to get left in the dust.
I think that's one of the huge reasons why we've seen the news and the announcement this week coming from the Oklahoma, like the collective, where they're trying to raise $3 million. Yeah, over the next few weeks. So
they didn't make that big of a dent in the first couple of days.
Like 150,000.
150,000.
Yikes.
We'll see. But again, when you talk about, I know that there was a lot of roster turnover, but guys, there was a lot of roster turnover at really key positions. I mean, Perion Winfrey, Isaiah Thomas, Benito, DTY, Brian Asamoah. And then, guys, I hate to say it, Caleb Williams, best player in college football. He covered up a lot of things last year. I mean,
he had three good games against the three worst teams in the Big 12 last year: Texas, TCU, Texas Tech. And outside of that, he was pretty average, except for one great play against Kansas.
I'm not pointing the finger at Dylan Gabriel. What's Oklahoma's record right now if Caleb Williams is the quarterback? Leave Lincoln Riley in LA. If Caleb Williams is in Norman right now, they don't lose to West Virginia. They don't lose to Baylor. They don't lose to Kansas State. This is probably 8-2, 7-3 football team.
It's second year Caleb Williams, and we knew we weren't going to have him back. He didn't want to be here. I think we all knew that.
I think that it's very apparent that Brent Venables took over a program where for the last 6 years, there has been zero accountability on the defensive side of the football. He inherited a defense that's been allowed to basically suck because they've hung their hat on relying on an elite offense to bail them out time and time again. And, guys, we've talked about it for the last month. The defense is mentally weak. Anytime adversity hits, they're not very talented. We're not aggressive. We're out physical at the point of attack against every elite team in this conference that we've played. And all of that adds up to a soft defense that plays with zero emotion. So again, I know that this team probably on paper, yes, when you go by the amount of stars, you look and see who came back for this team. But I just refuse to believe that Brent Venables and this coaching staff, they didn't forget how to coach. At some point, yes, I know that there's a lack of discipline. I know that the team should be better than 5-5, but there comes a point in time where you've got to hold the players accountable. Brent Venables can't go out there and make the tackle. LaDainian Washington can't catch the football. Bill Beanboat and Chavis and Todd Bates, they're not the ones out there getting false start penalties, getting offside. So there comes a point in time, you've got to hold the guys that are on the field playing in between the lines accountable for what's going on. And that's where I think that you're going to continue to see over the next couple of years, you're going to see, I think, a major roster turnover this cycle. I think that some difficult conversations are about to be had here in the next couple of weeks. You're going to see some players exit, whether it's, their own well-doing entering the transfer portal, or Brent's going to have to say, you know what, there's really not a place for you here. There's going to be a massive roster overhaul, I think. And then there's going to be development as the scheme continues to get installed, as Brent's able to get his guys in. I think you're going to see this. All these people out here that are, pushing the panic button saying, is Venables the guy? He's in over his head. He can't get it done. That's the most asinine thing that I've ever heard. Give it time. And I think that this program will get back to where it is, because Venables one of the best defensive minds in college football history, at least in the last 20 years. Jeff Lebby, on offensive coordinator, who coming into this season was on many people's short list to be a new head coach in the Power 5. Give it time. Try to figure out a way to get to a bowl game this year, win one out of the last two, take advantage of those 15 practices, and we'll see how it goes going into 2023.
So I think a lot of the frustration from the fan base is not just that things don't look good and that the team isn't winning, but the fact that there doesn't look to be much progress to me, we look at significantly worse from week 1 through 3 to now. So this development, they didn't forget how to coach. The one thing we complained about for Lincoln Riley and Alex Grinch for years was the lack of development, the lack of growth, the lack to see players reach their full potential. This is no different. That to me is where you have to lean back on the coaching, because these players aren't playing better than what they were at the start of the year.
So
I
we're
think.
blaming.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
So we're blaming Marvin Mims' 3 drop touchdowns this year. We're going to blame Dylan Gabriel's overthrows. Do you think that's coaching? A lot of those
It
moments
can
are
be.
play.
It can be. Here's the deal. I am not an X's and O's fundamental guy. I can only see what I see. But when I'm watching, what was the game that Robert Griffin was basically sitting there picking apart Dylan Gabriel's footwork?
It's TCU.
TCU. Yeah. He's sitting there saying, this is exactly why he's overthrowing everybody. If Robert Griffin III can sit there and do that after a week of preparation looking at Dylan Gabriel, why can't our coaching staff do that? Why is that adjustment not being made in practices? That's the stuff where I do think you can push it back, because that is fundamental stuff. There is some things that have nothing to do with coaching. Who was it? R. Mason Thomas or Grayson Halton, who literally lined up off sides.
Grayson Halton.
You can't coach that. That's just being a really, really not smart player. And I'm using those words instead of others I probably should. But there are things I think you can coach that are showing up in games where it's like, why aren't those things being addressed? That's the only thing I'm saying.
Yeah. And I don't disagree with you necessarily, Tyler, in regards to, like, I'm not on the Fire Brent train. I still think he's the right guy. I still think he's going to get at least 3 years to really, turn this thing around. But we can at the same time expect and demand a lot more from what we see out of this team.
Of course.
Case in point, Nebraska, 49-14 in week 3. If that game's played today against a Nebraska team that looks no better than what they did on that Saturday, I don't think that score is anywhere close to 49-14.
It's a dogfight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so we have to say, okay, yeah, he can't make Marvin Mims catch the ball. He can't make, some of these necessarily changes happen, but he can inspire that defense to go out and not just stay on the field while the fourth quarter clock runs to 0. Mm-hmm. A coach has to get through to his players. He has to be able to communicate and inspire those guys to at least play with some heart. And they're just not showing it.
One second, Tyler, because I think one thing, adding back to what Adam and I are saying, and I heard this on, I think it was the U40 pod, how does the wide receivers not have the right gloves on for a rainy game? That's freaking coaching. That's coaching. Those are things that don't fall to me on the players. I worked in equipment. The players don't come in there and say, ooh, I want this. No, you give them what they need for the conditions that they're about to play in. That's coaching. That is on that staff for not having the team prepared for things outside of the game to be ready. Those are the types of things that should drive this fan base nuts. That West Virginia had the right gloves on for rain, but Oklahoma didn't. How's that possible? That's the kind of stuff that just, I think, is invigorating.
It's the little knick-knack stuff that Oklahoma is just simply not doing, and that's
what Brent preaches.
No, I completely get that.
It's what he preaches. So where is it?
Well, and that's what I'm saying. Like, if we're still having this same conversation at this time next year, okay, that's when I think that you really need to start having the conversation of, okay, is Brent the guy that can get this done? But I think that it's just simply too early in the process. And kind of one last point that, if you guys want to give your thoughts on this, we've seen if there's one thing that the last month has shown us, whether it's on social media, whether it's on message boards, whether it's conversations that you have in the workplace, I still think that this, if you go down the list, you look at Alabama, you look at Georgia, Ohio State, hell, you go and watch TCU Baylor, or you go watch K-State Baylor from this past weekend, you watch Texas versus TCU. There are not very many guys on this Oklahoma football team that would start on those teams. We just simply don't look. We just don't simply look like that.
Why? It goes back to where are you pointing the finger? Why? Is it because they're not talented enough, or are they not being coached well enough? I don't think what we know.
And a majority of the guys on that TCU team wouldn't get a scholarship offer to Oklahoma.
Yep.
So it goes the other way too. So, I mean, there's enough guys on there, and I know I don't know if we're going to address the portal in more detail necessarily or not. It's kind of it's a thing that I think OU is moving in the right direction on, but I'm not fully sold that that's going to be an answer, because we looked at, who was in the portal from a defensive line perspective, not necessarily guys that were recruited into the portal, but who actually went through the portal, ended up somewhere else on the defensive line. There's really isn't that many difference makers. it's still an early process in the portal. We're still getting data out of that to see what comes out. We might get some defections from A&M that are really talented that maybe pan out. I don't know. But I'm just not holding my breath that the answers are going to be there. I think, and it's not going to be the answer that I want to hear, that other OU fans want to hear, but in order for this team to improve going into 2023, it's going to be the off season of internal development.
Yep.
Where is our Mason Thomas next year? Where is Grayson Holton? Can PJ Adebawore can we actually get a signature on his NLI here in about a month and get him on campus? Can he be a guy? Can Danny Stutzman improve? Can Jaron Kanek take someone's job and move David Agwebu off the field? It's not going to come from the portal, in my opinion. I just don't think that there's enough dudes there that can make a difference.
The elite teams are plugging specific positions into their roster from the portal.
Unless you're Georgia.
Well, even them.
Georgia didn't take a single transfer
last
year.
And that's
a one-off, though.
Even goes to my point. You look at the Gibbs kid that went from Georgia Tech to Alabama, like very specific needs on your roster.
Yeah.
The elite teams will have that because they've developed and have recruited at a high enough level where they don't need that turnover in their roster. If we have another massive turnover in this roster, that's all we're going to hear about next year, because that is the one thing that is giving me maybe a little bit of a higher doubt level on Venables and this coaching staff to get the job done, is because the excuses for this team are starting from the top. How many times do we need to hear Jeff Lebby say, it's a young team, these guys are still getting to know each other, we're freaking 10 games into the season? And what do you hear from the players directly after that? Got to get back to the drawing board, a lot of new faces. Like, it's trickling down. This is the culture that we wanted to get away from. And from the top, there are excuses after excuses after excuses, and you're starting to hear the players say the same thing. That's not the culture that Brent said he wanted. Am I off there?
It changed, from the K-State loss where Brent went out and kind of took a lot of the blame, and now it's more like, oh, we just gotta get better. Kind of a we thing, which I don't love that tone.
I think you've got to trim the fat on this roster, and I think that process starts here in a matter of about 3 weeks, because there's a lot of players on this roster. There's a few starters. There's also a lot of young guys that aren't getting any playing time. We don't know why. We don't know why some players that have been on campus for, a couple of years, why they can't seem to find their way onto the field. But if Venables is he's going to have to make some drastic changes this offseason, maybe from not just a roster standpoint, but, whether it's making a couple staff changes as well. I think all three of us can confidently say we're not sure if Ted Roof's going to be part of this staff next year. What are some things that Brent Venables is going to do in the offseason that's going to give fans maybe not a sense of relief, but these are holistic changes that we can tell that Brent is going to do what it takes to get Oklahoma back on the right path. I still think even sitting right now at 5-5, and I said this a month ago after we lost to Texas 49-0. If it's going to take a 6-6 or a 7-5 year for those holistic changes to be made, I'm okay with that, knowing that we're ultimately going to get to a place down the line where Oklahoma is back competing for conference championships and national championships.
Trimming fat only works if you replace it with something better.
Absolutely.
You can't lose weight and be down in chips and Twizzlers. That's not how this works. So
and
what are you going to fill the roster with?
You can't bring in recruits from Wyoming, from Tulane, different things like that. Oklahoma's going to have to get very, very aggressive in the portal, and just like we talked about just a second ago with the NIL, you're going to have to pony up some dollars. You're going to have to fork over some dollars to get some talent coming to you, because it's going to be the wild, wild west in the transfer portal this year. You're going to have to re-recruit your own roster. You're going to have to incentivize these kids to come play for your school as opposed to going over to this other one.
If guys from the number 8 overall recruiting class last year can't get on the field and make a dent with how bad the talent supposedly is in Norman, what makes the recruits from the number 6 or 5 or 6 class that they are right now think that they're going to get enough playing time? And what gives fans confidence that a guy like PJ Adebawore is going to come in and actually make a difference?
Hope they develop them, because I'm really looking forward to this $150,000 NIL deal, getting the 2 stars out of the portal, because that's all that's going to afford.
You look at the players, you look at the personnel that Brent had at Clemson, all the 4 stars, all the 5 stars. He had a handful of PJ Adebawores. when you start to get the elite talent in here that can run Venables' scheme the way he wants to, I think that's where you're going to start to see this defensive side of the football take those steps. At least I hope, because Venables didn't forget how to coach. When he's got elite talent like we've seen at Clemson over the last decade, he can get it done. They were the number 1 overall defense in college football for a handful of years for a reason. So give it time, give it repetition for these players and these coaches. It's going to be okay.
Are we even sure PJ is going to stick?
I don't know if I want to get into that. I will say this.
Let me just open this up real fast. Can OU recruit at that level?
Yes.
Can the brand, the financial backing, and the location of our university, can we compete at that level?
The brand, yes. The financial backing, no. But the track record of this staff, I think,
means nothing now.
From an NFL draft standpoint, I think that has a chance to make up from some of the shortcomings.
That window is so narrow for a high school recruit that doesn't watch college football. Because we're already 1 year removed. We have a new draft class that's coming out that's not going to get drafted. That's not going to be on Todd Bates' resume. So I don't know there. I will agree with you.
They're not his players, though. They're not his recruits. They're not his guys.
It doesn't matter. He needs to develop those guys. Even if it's from terrible to bad, he needs to develop them that direction.
Jordan Kelly and Josh Ellison, you're going to blame Todd Bates for the lack of
this
performance?
This is where it goes back to what Adam was saying about the portal. You did pick guys from the portal. You chose them.
Yep.
In the months of January and February, when the talent was a huge bulk of the talent was already gone.
And have they improved?
Not really. No.
That
has to be on coaching at some point.
Okay, flip it. Put Venables at Georgia. Put Kirby Smart at Oklahoma. Are you still gonna blame Kirby Smart that Josh Ellison and Jordan Kelly? And again, we're not here to pick on guys.
They chose them. Based
on what was available at the time, though.
But that's fine. Then don't take them. Have more scholarships for the next year, especially if you're going to end up 5-5.
Yeah, but you got to have depth.
But
for what? The depth doesn't do anything. There is no.
You've got to field bodies out there, though.
Well, Tyler,
I don't disagree.
I completely agree with you that the quality of the depth is not good. I completely agree.
Shouldn't it look better today, even if it's not good? Shouldn't it look better today than what it did week 1? And it doesn't.
Yes.
It needs to go from at least terrible to bad. That's still the point. Like, even if these players suck, they have to at least get to bad and then get them to average and then get them to good. Like, there needs to be a progression, and there's no progression. The guys are exactly the same, if not worse than they were from the first game.
But again, I always go back to the point, and we can look at it from the results as recent as 3 days ago. The R. Mason Thomas face mask, the drop passes, the inadvertent offside penalties. That's not coaching. At some point in time, you've got to hold the players accountable, and you can't blame Brent Venables or Jeff Levy because Marvin Mims can't catch the football.
So how
are the players being held accountable by this coaching staff?
Exactly.
I've been wondering that a lot.
We can't answer that. We can't answer that.
It doesn't sound like it.
They're allowing the same mistakes week after week after week. They're still playing. So
there's nobody behind them.
It doesn't matter. Are you going to get any worse than 5-5?
Well, you got to try to make a bowl game right now.
But let's talk about the past 2 games. You lost anyway. 49-0's the same as 33-31. It's a loss.
But I don't think it's as simple as saying, okay, just plug the next guy in and things are just going to automatically get better. Like, let's not forget.
The culture to change, you do.
But at the same time, Venables' job is to win football games. So he's going to put the guys out there that he thinks give them the best opportunity to win. I'm in agreement with you. I don't want to see Jaden Davis anymore. Throw Gentry Williams out there. I know what I've got from guys that have been on campus 3 to 4 years. If David Agwebu's not playing well, get him out. If Justin Broyles, which I'm again glad sounds like he's gonna be back this week. Didn't want to see his career in that way. If he's not playing well, if Key Lawrence isn't playing well, get him out. I don't want to see it anymore. The season's already over. You're 5-5. What do you have to lose? If McCade Mattower is not playing well, if Andrew Rame's not playing well, get him out. Put some of the young guys in there. The season's over anyway. What more do you have to lose?